Now
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:06 on this great Tuesday morning in your nation's capital. Thanks for tuning in here to O'Connor and Company. At 7:35, Mark Paoletta is going to join us to talk about the latest war on Clarence Thomas and some developments at the Supreme Court. At 8:05, Adam Gillette, Accuracy in Media. At 8:15, we're going to check in with our friend Luke Rosiak over at Daily Wire. He's got an unbelievable story about an absolute anti-Semitic Looney Tunes teacher in good standing in Bethesda, Maryland. And at 8:35, Greg Pemberton, the chairman of the D.C. Police Union. I'm Larry O'Connor. This morning we've got Angela Morabito here from the Defense of Freedom Institute in for Julie Gunlock, who is ailing. Thanks for being here, Angela.
It's great to be with you, Larry.
And it's great to be with Representative August Pfluger as well, Congressman, Republican from the 11th Congressional District and member of the House Committee on Homeland Security. Congressman, thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, Larry, thanks for having me. Angela, thanks for being on this morning as well.
Well, your colleagues yesterday had a chance to pass a resolution calling for the impeachment of Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, an idea I think you're behind based on your public statements against the gentleman. But it failed. It failed because, sadly, too many Republicans walked over there with Democrats and blocked that effort. You're having the secretary in a hearing today. What is going on here with him? And frankly, what's going on with the small handful of Republicans who think that he's doing just a fine job?
Well, I hope that they don't think that. And my guess is it's more procedural. But, the fact is that we should have been doing this. And I am very proud of Chairman Mark Green for walking the Homeland Security Committee through the failures of this, really just kind of despicable leadership. I mean, the most basic thing to our country is securing the homeland. And he obviously has failed. 7.5 million people have come across. He doesn't know who 1.5 million known gotaways are. I mean, this affects me in Texas. I live just 100 miles from the border, and we really feel the brunt of this every single day, not to mention the 159, 160 people who match the terror watch list. So it's pretty clear that he's failed. I have publicly called for him to resign, and I think impeachment really is the way to go. I hope that Chairman Mark Green's continued plan, I don't think the effort will let up. I think, for some, that wasn't the mechanism yesterday.
Yeah, and there are a few of those congressmen, actually, who I agree. I'm sure it's a procedural thing because Virginia Fox, Tom McClintock, Darrell Issa, they know what time it is. So hopefully you will assuage their fears moving forward with the impeachment. That said, today's hearing is going to be an important one. Not only do you have Secretary Mayorkas, but you also have FBI Director Christopher Wray to talk about the very real threats right now under the guise of Homeland Security, under the very real Homeland Security threats here. What are you hoping to learn today in this hearing?
Well, I think for starters, what you've seen Director Wray testify to the Senate, committees on national security or Homeland Security is he has publicly said that he's worried about Hamas, he's worried about Hezbollah, he's worried about the impact here inside our borders. He's really distancing himself from anything the Biden administration is doing or has done. And so I think pairing that up with Mayorkas, who has defended the policy, who has said multiple times that the border is secure. He changed his tune the last time he was in front of us. So I think we want to see if they disagree. Is there disagreement in the upper crust of Biden's leadership? We know it's failed policy. It's failed policy here. It's failed policy foreign-wise. The president's meeting with Xi Jinping. He's begging AMLO to come to certain conferences. I mean, the guy is just a disaster when it comes to strength. He's all about appeasement. So let's see where Mayorkas stands. He's very slippery. He's not going to tell us anything new. But let's see if we can pair him up with what he's previously said and what Director Wray is saying.
Congressman, the failures of the Biden administration's border policy are on full display. It's so painfully hard to miss. But people have varying ideas about how to fix our immigration system and how to fix our wide open border. If you could wave a magic wand today and make some policy changes to fix the problem, where would you start?
Angela, great question. It's three things. Number one, remain in Mexico. President Trump got it right when he went to AMLO. He went to the president. He said, you will help us in this situation or we will put tariffs on your goods. And they ended up helping us in this situation. So you come through Mexico, you apply for asylum or for your visa in Mexico, not at the southwest border. That's number one. Number two, you give Border Patrol agents, ICE, Customs, anybody who's working this national security mission the ability to turn people away at the border, to tell them no. They actually act in their national security presence and position. They don't just process people. And number three, you raise the bar for what it means to claim asylum. You don't go through multiple countries. If you went through Central America, through the Northern Triangle countries and through Mexico, and then you got to the United States, well, that's called asylum shopping. And we're not okay with that. Nowhere else in the world, not even in Europe, do they do this. And you're able to turn people away and you raise that bar. It's not about more money. Joe Biden wants to throw more money at it. He's got a $100 billion proposal that includes more money for Border Patrol. Yes, we do need more agents, but those three policy changes are the ones that help us communicate. I've been to the Darien. I've been to the southwest border many, many times, and these are the consequences we need.
So moving forward, and I think that it's important that you're looking at all of these things, but you're going to have FBI Director Wray in front of you today, and Lord knows, I mean, I can't imagine how you comb through all of the things you would like to ask him to get to the final, 2 or 3 questions you'll be able to do in your allotted time. What are you hoping to learn specifically from him today, given all of the issues that he seems to be right in the center of?
I think number one, the FBI, obviously we have a lot of questions about the weaponization of government, and we have a lot of questions about what has happened with President Trump and those things. We're probably going to stay away from a lot of those and really dig into, and some members may go there, but we're going to dig into what is the threat in our homeland of the people that we don't know about, the ones that were known gotaways, the ones that came into the United States very close to my own home, close to the places where our farmers and ranchers are living. What threat do they pose? Who are they affiliated with? What terrorist organizations do they have ties or contact with? I think, number one, that's probably what we want to learn from him. And number two, what are they planning? And a lot of the stuff they'll probably claim, well, that's classified and that's law enforcement sensitive. Okay, well, when we read the post 9/11 commission report, the words that they used when they got together and they did their debrief was the system was flashing red. I'm telling you, Larry, the system is flashing red right now, and we want Christopher Wray to say that.
We're speaking with Congressman August Pfluger of Texas, and perhaps also he could allocate some of the special agents and funds that he uses to investigate parents at school board meetings and Catholics who go to traditional Latin Mass to take a look at those threats that are clear and obvious in front of us all, Congressman. I know your colleagues are loath to get political in a forum like this, but, this is kind of a political issue that's putting us at risk.
Well, it is. And look, there's plenty of questions we want to ask him. You're right. You let off with there's thousands of questions we need to ask him. The most pressing ones today are going to have to be, revolve around the security of our nation, the security of our people, and maybe get the sense of what is your, way forward to not weaponize the FBI. There's plenty of good men and women who work in the FBI who are doing a good job, but at the top, it's been weaponized. And of course, then you have DA issues of not prosecuting those kinds of crimes. We're going to leave that for the Oversight Committee, for the Judiciary Committee, but here on the Homeland Security Committee, we're going to focus on actual security of our nation.
Right, and moving forward with the impeachment process, hopefully, of Mayorkas, amongst others. We'll leave it there, Congressman August Pfluger. Thank you, sir. Always good to talk with you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
We will be watching that hearing today at 9 a.m., and also the March for Israel will be happening on the Mall just a few hours later, and I think it's important that those two are conjoined, frankly. It is 7:50.
Later this morning on the Chris Plant Show, Gavin Newsom cleans up San Francisco like a Potemkin village for the Chinese communist visit. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
Let me clean up a little mess here. That hearing is tomorrow, by the way, 9 a.m. tomorrow, Homeland Security Committee, where they will hear from Mayorkas and Christopher Wray all at the same time. Now, I'm no huge fan of Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. We disagree on quite a bit, Angela Morabito. But I have to say, yesterday he was faced with a situation that I think he handled pretty well. He was sitting on the Amtrak in the quiet car, by the way. quickly, I love telling this story. I never knew there was a quiet car. I'm from California originally. I was here visiting one time when I was still living in California. I was working for Breitbart when Andrew Breitbart was still alive, and the two of us had to take a train from D.C. to New York. So he had me get the seats. He got pulled off by TSA for some reason, random checks going onto the train at Union Station. So they're doing the strip search of Andrew, and I go ahead to get us seats, and I get us seats in the quiet car. And Andrew comes and joins us, and if you know anything about Andrew Breitbart, the quiet car is not his not a place where he's used to spending much time. You can't put Andrew Breitbart in a quiet car; it's impossible. And he was so angry at me. He said, "Seriously? You're not allowed to make phone calls. You're not allowed." It actually ended up being very therapeutic for him to have to deal with that discipline on the way up to New York. But that said, I got in trouble that day. Anyway, Chris Coons is sitting on the quiet car. And a dude comes up, sits across from him, and confronts him over his Israel policy. And I want you to listen to how it went.
Senator, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but when I call for a ceasefire in Gaza, I'm a journalist, my name's Aaron Mate. When I call for a ceasefire in Gaza, you have 4,600 children killed. 46. I know it's a quiet car, and I apologize for abuse, but I understand, but children are dying. Children are dying, sir. More than 40. When I call for a ceasefire, they're being killed with our weapons. U.S. weapons are killing kids in Gaza.
Who are you?
My name is Aaron Mate. I'm a journalist.
Nice to meet you, Aaron.
Likewise.
Please stop talking to me.
I'm sorry, sir. It's a dire importance.
Hold on. Let's pause it there. That's a beautiful moment, isn't it? Nice to meet you. Please stop talking to me.
Print that on name tags. I feel like that would make things pretty straightforward in a lot of situations, especially the quiet car. You gotta respect the quiet car, and this quote-unquote journalist very clearly doesn't respect much of anything. To accost a public figure in a place like that with a blatantly pro-Hamas viewpoint, I find pretty repulsive.
Yeah, Aaron Mate is he's an activist. He's a political activist and agitator. To identify yourself merely as a journalist is sort of rich, but let's go ahead. A little bit more of this.
Likewise.
Please stop talking to me.
I'm sorry, sir. It's of dire importance. More than 11,000 civilians that we're talking been killed. I'm a journalist with for the Gray Zone.
What's the Gray Zone?
It's a U.S. web-based news website.
Good for you.
Thank you. And right now with our support, kids are being killed. I'm sorry. With our weapons, I'm asking you to explain when I call for a ceasefire.
You're bothering me and everyone else around me.
Kids in Gaza are being massacred. I'm asking you, please explain when I call for a ceasefire.
Stop. Sir, could I please have some help here?
Kids are being killed with our weapons.
Stop. I'm asking you to stop.
Why not stop the? When I call for the stopping of
them? Interview me. You're bothering everybody else around.
It's a crisis right now.
How did you get this seat?
I bought the seat.
No. He's bothering me while I'm trying to do work.
And our government is paying for weapons that are murdering children. Guys, I'm asking when I call for a ceasefire.
Aaron,
can you explain that?
please stop.
Can I ask you to explain when I call for a ceasefire?
You've already asked me 5 times. I'm not going to call for a ceasefire. I strongly support humanitarian causes. I've urged the Israeli government to target their campaign against Hamas. But do you think
the campaign is targeted against Hamas when civilians are being massacred, when babies in incubators are dying because the fuel is being cut off?
I'm going to have you thrown off this train. Please stop doing this.
I have to ask these questions.
10 times.
I know, and
you're getting as professional, measured, and appropriate an answer out of me as you can. This is not professional journalism. Please get up and leave.
I don't think it's human.
Aaron Mate in the Gray Zone. He is his podcast that he hosts is called Pushback. And you look at his resume, he's a reporter and producer for Democracy Now!, Vice, Real News Network, and Al Jazeera. Oh, okay. There it is.
Surprise, surprise. This person has an ideological agenda that is not based on facts. Yeah. This journalist, if we can even call him that, clearly didn't do his research, because if he did, he would know that Hamas is the reason Gazans are living in poverty. He would know that the leaders of Hamas live lives of luxury in Qatar, while their people are made to suffer because they spend all the money on tunnels, on rockets, on things that actively harm people rather than help them. So just a stunning display of ignorance right there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, my favorite part was, we're cutting. They don't have enough fuel to, and babies are dying because there's no fuel. Really, how are those rockets continuing to be launched? I'm pretty sure that takes fuel. Somehow, maybe the priorities of Hamas is the problem here. But Aaron Mate would never sit across a member of Hamas on a train making these statements because, well, first of all, Hamas is so dysfunctional they can't operate a train. But secondly, they'd behead him. There's that. 7:23. If dental fear is weighing heavy on your mind for longer than you care to admit, I have the answer to your needs. It's Dr. Robin, Dr. Coming up, we're going to check in on the Supreme Court. They've got new rules now to govern the justices, a code of conduct that, well, it actually isn't enforceable, so it's really just sort of a token, but it suggests that there's something wrong at the Supreme Court and honestly bows to the pressure that has been put on Clarence Thomas, the unfair pressure. Meanwhile, the new Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson actually has an apparent conflict of interest. Mark Paoletta is going to lay it all out for it coming up next.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now.
On News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:36 now as we continue our morning journey through American politics and pop culture. It's O'Connor and Company. And at 8:05, Adam Gillette, Accuracy and Media, will join us. 8:15, Luke Rosiak on a Looney Tunes story out of Montgomery County with an absolutely vile anti-Semitic teacher, employee in good standing there at MCPS. And at 8:35, Greg Pemberton, chairman of the D.C. Police Unit. I'm Larry O'Connor. Angela Morabito in for Julie Gunlock. Good to have you, Angela. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And we turn now to our friend Mark Paoletta, who's served as assistant counsel to President George Herbert Walker Bush, worked with Justice Clarence Thomas on his confirmation, and has been a fierce and loyal advocate of the justice. And frankly, the reputation of the Supreme Court at large, because as the political left tries to undermine Clarence Thomas, they're really undermining the court and everything, and the independence of the judiciary, in my opinion. Mark, am I wrong there? Thanks for joining us.
Larry, you got it perfectly right. Thanks for having me on this morning. This is not about ethics. All of these attacks are not about ethics. It's about trying to control the court. And the left does not respect an independent judiciary, right? They want to control it. And we see that, right, when you had the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, going to the Supreme Court in March of 2020 and directly threatening Supreme Court justices by name on what? On an abortion case that they were hearing at that very moment. So this is what they will attack you. They will destroy you if you don't, rule the way they want. And we saw the latest round, which we're in the middle of right now, of attacks on Justice Thomas and Justice Alito. And when did that really ramp up, Larry? It ramped up right after the Dobbs decision. Again, an abortion decision that overturned the most despicable opinion, maybe in the past generation, Roe v. Wade. And so that's what this is all about: is attacking the court, weaponizing ethics. And as I pointed out yesterday on a post on X, they don't care about ethics on the left. What they want to do is go after justices on the right to chill them, to bully them, to send a signal to the other justices that if you do things we don't like, we will come for you. We will come for we will come for your spouses. We will come for your family. Right? That's what an assassin tried to do. Would-be assassin with Kavanaugh. Right.
Well, and that's why it's fascinating to see their absolute acquiescence to what appears to be a very real and serious conflict of interest. This involving the spouse of not Clarence Thomas, but Ketanji Brown Jackson. What do we know now about this Dr. Patrick Jackson and the brand new nomination he just got for the D.C. Judicial Disabilities and Tenure Commission?
Yeah, really interesting, Larry. Patrick Jackson's a doctor. He gets nominated to this commission. Of all the people in D.C., somehow Patrick Jackson gets nominated, and I think it will go through by the D.C. Council to sit on a commission, right? I think there's 7 members that have oversight, removal power, suspension power, retirement. I think it's involuntary retirement power over judges that sit on the local courts. So that's the trial court, courts of appeals. But those opinions go up to the Supreme Court, possibly if they're like a state court, right? But here's a spouse of a justice sitting on this commission. Now, what do they do with Ginny Thomas? She's in the political lane, doing things. She's an advocate. She's a conservative grassroots activist, and yet they attack her for her political work that has nothing to do with the Supreme Court. And yet here, complete silence on this appointment. And one of the interesting things, Larry, is that on his CV that he submitted to the council for his nomination, and in the hearing, which I watched the other day, he doesn't mention at all that he is actually a consultant and provides expert witness testimony for litigants and lawyers, companies before the court system. And that would seem to be also a conflict of interest with respect to, judges that he might be considering in terms of suspensions or the like. And he doesn't put that down on his form. And again, silence from the left. I put this up on Twitter to alert people to this. And it also goes back to the fact that Justice Jackson on her forms, okay, everyone's going crazy about the disclosure forms of the conservative justices, certainly. Justice Jackson admitted when she was nominated that for many, many years, she failed to disclose that her husband was making consulting fees in medical malpractice cases. And she made an amendment in her form when she was nominated, but she didn't specify the years. She didn't specify the clients. And again, this double standard with respect to the conservative justices and their working spouses. What does the lefty, what does the New York Times do? What does ProPublica do? They go after the justices' spouses. Who are they representing? What kind of clients do they have? But here, nobody's raised an issue, I think, except for me, about the fact that, we don't know who Patrick Jackson's clients are. Do they have business before the Supreme Court? And my view is, if there's going to be a standard for conservative justices, we should apply that across the board to all the justices. But as we know, and as we started off the discussion, this isn't about ethics. This is about bullying the court and controlling the court.
Good morning, Mark. It's great to have you with us. This story is such an ethical tangle, for lack of a better term. What would it take to get things right, to get us out of this mess? And to assuage any fears that the American people may very, very rightly have, that there is some corruption or at least some lack of ethics going on at the highest levels of our judicial system.
Yeah, well, I think on this one, I think my understanding is the record is open until November 15th, which is tomorrow. I just learned about this in the past couple of days. And I think the full council votes on it November 21st. So your listeners living in the D.C. area concerned about this should write to the commission or the council, the D.C. council, and ask them, Dr. Jackson couldn't think of any conflict of interest he could have, but I identified one, which is that, he didn't disclose his consulting business with respect to, cases that are before judges, presumably in that system. And so I think there needs to be some more questions about what's going on here. And of course, how did he get this? Why was the council picking a person whose spouse is just appointed to the Supreme Court, in the past couple of years? And those types of questions. I just think it's, surprising, right? Or not surprising. It's shocking that the left has zero interest in this happening. And I just stumbled upon it late last week and looked at it over the weekend, and think it deserves more scrutiny for sure.
At the very least. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court, real fast, Mark, has put out this new code of ethics. It's not enforceable, and I don't know, it's fine. There's nothing objectionable about it, but it does suggest that they're acquiescing in some way to the complaints that have been levied against Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. In a way, this is, I think, the Chief Justice sort of bowing to pressure, and I don't think that's necessarily a healthy development.
Well, look, I think that with respect to Justice Thomas and Justice Alito, you mentioned, I've looked at this stuff a lot. They have complied with all the rules. This is just, these attacks on them are gaslighting on steroids. I looked at the code. I testified last year before the Congress. I don't think the court should adopt a code. There's no reason for a code. They have better ethics than, guess what, than the Senate, the United States Senate, that doesn't even have a recusal law with respect to senators. Senators can vote on, matters that affect their own financial interests. But here, I think, as you said, Larry, I think that the substance is restating everything that the court has already been following. and they adopted it. I'd say this, though. Now that they've adopted it, I think what Durbin was saying was if you adopt a code, I drop this ethics investigation, which is unprecedented, unconstitutional. And I think that the Republicans should hold them to that and fight back real hard. They did a great job last week, as you saw, coming up with 90 amendments. And I think that they should, they should have more amendments if they go forward with this crazy investigation, constitutional investigation, but fight back hard for the independence of the judiciary. Right, the Supreme Court. Right, there is no way that the Congress can legislate any kind of ethics code on the Supreme Court, and that is the bright red line. They've been following this stuff. They put it all together in one document. And that's what they've done. But I think people like maybe Durbin, definitely White House, will not be happy with this. And it's kind of funny, right? I looked at the Code of Ethics. One of the things in there is that you're not allowed to belong to a discriminatory club. Oh, and guess what? Sheldon Whitehouse has long, been a member of a discriminatory all-white club called the Bailey's Club. And I think the Senate Judiciary Committee should subpoena that club for all of the communications with Sheldon Whitehouse. He said he's been trying to make changes. Let's see those documents of him trying to make changes to a club. I think that he and his wife are the largest shareholders, and I think it's just
that's a great
crazy,
point.
Right?
That's hilarious.
Here's a guy going after a black conservative justice who grew up in segregation. The Democrats, the party of segregation, right? Going after Clarence Thomas. So, it's just a circus.
Let's see the Senate live by those same standards. All right, we got to leave it there. Mark, great stuff. Always like having you. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
it's 7:47. Well, we're kind of tight here, sadly. I don't have a whole lot of time to get to this, but this Montgomery County principal has retired. He's a principal of Clarksburg High School, and he approved and supported a school-wide so-called pro-Palestine walkout. Parents, of course, furious. He received a ton of backlash, and he put out a resignation letter last night saying he's done. There will be more information about this, I'm sure. But interesting that in Montgomery County, which, by the way, has a high level of Jewish population, this kind of stuff is not tolerated now, suddenly. Well, we'll see. We've got Luke Rosiak coming up to talk about a teacher who currently is employed, and her statements are despicable. But this principal just decided he couldn't take the pressure that he was under for allowing and supporting this really pro-Hamas demonstration in his high school.
It's good to see some accountability here, but this whole incident fits a pattern that we have seen in places like New York and the San Francisco Bay Area, where these quote-unquote student-led walkouts aren't really student-led at all. They are encouraged, promoted by adults in positions of power in the schools, including, in the case of New York, by outside advocacy groups, including groups made up of New York City teachers who were actively telling their students to get up out of class, go walk for a ceasefire. If they wanted to teach their kids the truth, they would teach them that being pro-Palestinian, if you actually want to support those people, you got to be anti-Hamas.
Thank you. Well, I'm interested to see what else is at play here. His name is Edward Owusu. He was the high school principal of Clarksburg High School, and he said he wanted to spend more time with his family and pursue personal interests. Something tells me there's more at play here.